Friends, welcome back to Cyberscriptus. In this session of Python learning, we would look at another loop, that is for loop. In the last session, we looked at the while loop, and the for loops are very similar to while loops, but there are some subtle difference that we would look into it. So first thing is, let's look at the general syntax. So general syntax is for a variable name in iterable. Now what is an iterable? Iterable is something that you can iterate over. Technically speaking, it should implement magic methods IDER and next. So we would look into details of this when we look at objects and classes. But for now, you need to understand that your list, strings, range, sequence, this all are iterables and you can use them with for loop. So you have a for statement and then a block of code that will be executed as long as items are available in this iterable. And then you can again uh, optional else statement similar to while loop. So let's just go to our PyCharm and see in action our for loops. Let me create a new Python file. I'll name it as for loop file. So now let's write a function to print numbers 0 to 5. So in the last session that for while loop, what we do is we take a variable, initialize it with 0, and then we have our while loop. We say print I, and then we need to increment I by 1. This is how we print. With for, this becomes very easy. So particularly you don't have to worry about this initialization increment part. So how would I do with for loop? So with for, I would want for I in range 5 and print I. That's it. So what happens is, what range function does is, so range function returns a sequence of number starting from 0 by default and it increments it by 1. So the syntax of range is range, let me put it here, range, start, stop and step. So in this case, we have not given any start. So it would start from 0 and it would stop at 5. So let's see what does it print. See, so it started with 0 and it went up to 4. So the end index is not included. So it will go till 4. So this is how you can print a sequence of numbers using for loop. What let us print for in range. Let us use all the three start, stop, and step. So I want to start from 5. I want to go till 50 and I want to print every 5 steps. So it started from year 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 20, all the way up to 45. So if you are using for certain things for is much easier than while, and your code would look very compact and clean. Let us take one more. Let's say I want to traverse backwards. Let's say from 25 to 5. Now in this case, since I'm coming backwards, my step would be negative. So what happened is it started from 25 and is go all the way up to 5 with minus 3 steps. So this is how you can print numbers using for loop. You can, if you want to print backwards, you can also use reversed function. So what reverse function basically do is, if you give it an interval or a sequence, it would reverse it order. So what we have done is range 5 would give 0 to 4, and when we pass this sequence to reverse, it reverses the sequence. So we'll get 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Here is your output. Now let's see use of continue statement. So we are going to use same example as we did in while loop. We want to print only odd numbers. For what I can say for I in range n, so basically we are starting from 0, we'll go all the way up to 9. And what I'm saying is if I mod plus 2 is equal to 0, if I modulus 2 equal to 0, it means it's an even number. If it's an even number, I want to continue. If not, I would print I. The separator. This is just to separate our output. That's it, nothing else. So see, now it is printing only odd numbers. So again, what is happening here is it would start from 0 to 9. So what continue does is continue would pass the control back to the start of the loop, and it won't execute rest of the code block for that particular loop. So what happens is if initially it starts with I equal to 0, then I equal to 1. So when I equal to 1, I mod 2 is not equal to 0. So this continue won't get executed and it will print. Then I would be incremented by 1. So I would be 2. So 2 mod 2 is 0. So 2 mod 2 is 0. The continue statement will pass the control back to the first start of the loop. And this line won't get printed. So that is how continue works. Now let's see the use of break statement. Again, we are going to use the similar example of finding an element in a list. So let's say my list is equal to 10, 5, 8, 20, 10. And now this index is equal to 0. So we are taking a variable called index because we will be accessing this list using index. And then find item is equal to 20. So this is the item 20 that we want to find in this list. Okay. So now what I can do is for index comma item in enumerate my list. And if item is equal to double equal to current item, then we want to print item found at index and break. So what is happening here is we are passing the list to an enumerator to enumerate constructor, and it would create an enumerator and it would and the for would enumerate over it, giving us index an auto increment index. So this would be incremented every time, and the item would be coming from the list. Now, if item is equal to our find item, then we have found our item and we don't want to go further. But there is no point in going further in the list because we already found our item. So we'll just we use the break to come out of the loop. So what break statement does is it won't execute rest of the loop at all. It would break that loop and it will come out. Now let's see now. So see our index is found at 3 because 20 is this is index 0, 1, 2 and 3. So if I put 10 here, what happens? As soon as the our loop starts, it will find it at the first item. So once we have found the item, there is no point in traversing the list and keep looking for that element because we have already found our element at index 0 in this case. So in such conditions, we use break. So whenever you want to come out of a for loop, before this iterator is complete, you can use your break statement. Now look at the use of else. So just like we had else in while, we have else in for as well. And here we would print. So this else block would be executed only when this for loops complete successfully. So once the for loop is completed, then this else part would be executed. If we come out of the for loop using break statement, then this else part won't get executed. Let's see. So because we found the our element in the list, this break statement was executed and hence else part was not executed. But if I make it 100 here and run it, now what happens is since this is not available in the list, we will traverse the entire list and then we will come out of the for loop. So as soon as we come out of the for loop, this else part would get executed. Now let's see how would we iterate a list using for. So we would be using this list for iteration. So I will have to use for. I hope you remember the syntax for variable in iterator, right? So here variable is, let's say I want to take item as my variable and my iterator is my list. So for item in my list, what I have to do is I have to print item. That's it. And this is the output 10, 5, 8, 20 and 10. So this one liner if you want to print your list. Another way to iterate a list is for I in, I am using range function now. I'll take length of my list and then I will access my list using index I. So this is similar to, see, the length of the our list is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is as good as for I in range, because length my list, this function would give me 5, and hence this would print my list 0, 1, and so forth till 5, because range goes from 0 to 4. So when I say range 5, it actually goes from 0 to 4. So this is my index 0, this is index 1, 2, 3, and 4, and everything will be printed. Now let's say how we can iterate a dictionary. So let me define one dictionary. So I am defining a dictionary of country and cities. Dictionary. So to iterate this dictionary, what you can do is I can use two variables, country, comma, city in my dictate items. With country and city is city. So this is how you can traverse a dictionary using for loop. Another way to do is for country in mydict.keys. So if you would recall from our dictionary session, mydict.keys would give you sequence of keys. So what we can do is country is country because our country is key, and city is, now since we have the key we can access the value using mydict and the key. So this is the output of our second for loop. Now let's look at nested for loops. A nested for loop is basically a for loop within a for loop. So what we would do is, our use case is, let's print multiple of numbers. For that, I would use first for loop and then second for loop here. And what we would do is we're just going to print I multiplied by j. That's it. and new line here. See what is happening is, and we are getting these zeros. So if I want to remove these zeros, what I can do is I can give it a start index because by default it starts from 0. So if I give it, similarly I can do it for J as well, and we are getting this. So if I give this as 10, so basically your outer loop is deciding how many rows you will have, and your inner for loop is deciding how many columns you will be having. And we are just multiplying range I into j, and that's how we are getting this table. So this is how you can use your for loops. So for loop, for certain things, for loop is much easier than while loop because you don't have to initialize, you don't have to increment or decrement those variables. So for printing, again, it's just a one-liner. You don't have to initialize I equal to 0 and you don't have to do I is equal to I plus 1 every time because all those things are being taken care by for itself. So we look at how to use for loops, the use of continue and break statements. We also looked at nested for loops. We saw how to iterate your list and dictionaries using for loops. So again, I am saying same thing again and again that to get hold of these things, you need to practice a lot. So you have to take small problems, try to solve them with different methods using for loops and while loops. And again, if you have any questions or queries, feel free to drop me a comment. I'll reply you back. Thanks.